Great. Well, good evening and welcome to everybody in attendance today, as well as to those who are joining us via a live stream for this event on how nations can cope with digital transformation. And it's a particular pleasure to welcome our speaker, the President of Estonia, Kersti Kaljulaid, to Chatham House. The President, as many of you will know, assumed her position in October of 2016, becoming the first woman to be head of state of Estonia. And she's also, I think it's worth pointing out, a member of that generation which came of age in the immediate aftermath of the dissolution of the Soviet Union and the full restoration of Estonian independence, and which then began to set out a modernizing vision for the country. And this vision was not only to embrace and to catch up with European neighbors and Western allies, but to aspire to some important forms of international leadership too. And this leadership and this vision of modernity is particularly evident in the sweeping initiatives that are captured under the rubric e-Estonia, a raft of measures that harness digital innovations to connect the citizen to the state and to public services. They place technology really at the heart of governance, but are also intended to encourage important economic objectives like bureaucratic streamlining, productivity gains, inward investment, and the fostering of an entrepreneurial economic environment. So we have a tremendous opportunity, I think, this evening to learn about how digital transformations of this kind can be effected and what lessons have been learned in the case of Estonia that might be transferable to a range of other societies. And perhaps we'll also touch on the question of risk and risk mitigation that are sometimes entailed in these changes. Estonia is pursuing, I think, very much a 21st century governance and economic strategy and model in a security and geopolitical environment where the residues of the 20th century still loom large, as we've recently been reminded. And as the centrality of technology and the dependence on technology in societies deepen, what are the measures that those societies need to take to reduce vulnerability to subversion or the breaching of various information systems? So, Madam President, we look forward very much to hearing your remarks and your thoughts. Welcome.
Thank you for these kind words about me, myself, and Estonia. Indeed, maybe it would be good to start with the statement that digital is not the first big wave of legally permissive environment creation which has brought investment to the country. I would think the first one was actually in the early 90s when our cost levels were the dream of everybody, and then you really could easily attract money to your country by simply having a much easier tax system, and we did it. Later it was copied quite a lot. The next time, indeed, was already digital, but also digital was not alone. Also at the turn of the century we created permissive environment for population-level genome investigations. And this is now giving us the situation where, with the cost of hopefully not more than 25 euros per capita, we are able to provide quite soon for 10% of our population already information on how easy it is for them to get diabetes type 2 and other common genetically hereditary diseases. So why I'm telling this is because it demonstrates that if you do not have money, but you want to provide your people with services, then there is a way to do it, and this is create a legally permissive environment. Right now, we are indeed already thinking, and I will talk about it later as well, we are thinking about how to regulate artificial intelligence. And even if we know that we are very far from creating artificial intelligence, probably further away than Elon Musk is thinking, but we do have lots of automated systems, and regulating for one will also cover the other, the liability issues, etc. So we are indeed thinking of how to make sure that this wave of technology will not pass Estonia by. For example, our traffic code can regulate for a situation of a car and a robot having an accident, and we've already had such an accident with a package delivery robot and a car. The car driver was found guilty. So it shows you that it's more general. It's not just that we happened on a gold mine in digital. We do it systemically in Estonia. 70 years ago, we wanted to really provide our people with digital services, like Industry 4.0 is thinking. We thought that if we automatize the processes and remove people from the chain of providing the services and delivering goods, then we can afford more with our small workforce in public sector, low tax burden of the GDP, which has never exceeded 35%, but with a population which is looking towards Scandinavia for public services to be really at the good level. And now our people count online as part of the everyday life. Actually, last year we had a hiccup because of a technology provider, and some people had to go to a government office to restart their digital identities. And we almost had a riot. I mean, people had to wait for an hour in a government office. Shock and horror. And this is when we realized that the societal disruption is complete. We have digitally disrupted the society. It's not anymore digital with, if needed, paper alternative. It's now digital which needs digital alternatives. Luckily, we have several ways of digital identification, so we could continue with the digital Estonia. So we have this digital disruption in present, but I think you have it too. Curiously, it has passed most governments, but if you think of your people and your businesses, then actually there is not much difference compared to Estonian or an English person or French. We all partially start and end our transactions online. And I am often asked why people trust banks online, but not, for example, university applications, which is a government service. And here I have to say I have no answer, because governments need to really think seriously why their people do not trust their services, while they are perfectly at ease when the other party is private and deals with, let's say, with their money. We cannot answer it. Our people trust our government service provision. And part of it is because, of course, we have proven to people that you cannot nose around the databases and systems. It's offense if you do it, and you will be punished. So no, it's not okay if you are a police officer and in principle you have technical access and you can check your ex-boyfriend's new girlfriend's salary level or whatever in wherever system. It's an offense. You will be taken to court for it. We've had a few cases of that, and people learn very quickly not to do. So we demonstrate that government does actually protect people's data. And also, if, let's say, Estonian police checks my tax record, then I would get a notification. And here comes my second puzzle, which I cannot solve for people of other countries, but I'm constantly asking myself, how come that people do not trust, let's say, e-health database, which will warn me if somebody checks my data, but they do trust the paper in the doctor's office where you don't know who last read it and made copies. So the problem with digital is we very often try to ask for absolute security, whereas we would simply be looking for comparison with analog world security, and there digital normally trumps it. These might be some explanations why Estonians trust and the others have difficulties in trusting. Anyway, we have something which I think is vital for digital disruption of a society, and this is that the public and the private sector services all build on the same platform. It's called Crossroads, and we use the same system for all services, which makes internet inherently safer for users. Because first of all, of course, we are not anonymous online. We have passports online as well. It's our digital ID. So I know the other partner with whom I'm talking. In addition, our talking channel is encrypted, so nobody can listen in. And I think this is extremely important, that we provide people with this kind of security, that they know with whom they are talking. But it also means that since the only thing we provide is this communication platform for different parties, the number of services can go up independently from the government. It can be done by private companies as well. Nowadays, we also have, on the offer side, e-residency offer for people who are not Estonian citizens, but who can join our platform from outside and use some services which are provided to them, and also create new services. And this again enlarges our sandbox for the new technology testing. It is very important to also stress that at no point in time we have created any cutting-edge technology. Estonian technology of digital identity is something which private companies know long time, and we didn't invent it. Finns had it before us, for example. We actually knew they had it. We took and used it. It's widely available, but after all, it's very similar with most things in the world. If you think how much that we landed on the moon changed your everyday life, I don't know how much it did, but I'm quite sure that the washing machine helped much more. So low-level technology in the hands of the whole population with high penetration rates is much more beneficial than a cutting edge in the hand of 1% of the population. This is another lesson. Estonian ID and digital identity system is whole inclusive. We achieved it by simply sneaking it on our travel document within the European Union. So everybody had it, and everybody had the right to, and the possibility to start to using it. It is also maybe good to say what was the first service which we offered, and it's a traditional one. We knew that you have a saying, and Americans too, that nobody wants to see the taxman. So Estonian Tax Board, online tax board, is first online service which we offer, so that you don't need to see the taxman. And in March 2000, for the first time, physical persons got the possibility to submit their electronic income tax returns via internet banks. And by 2003, 63% of VAT tax returns and 53% of income and social security tax returns were submitted by electronic means, because people are lazy inherently, and if they realized it's safe and easy, they use it. Of course, now it's VAT returns 99.3%, natural person income tax returns 95%, etc. So everybody is doing this online. And what has the state gained through this, in addition to customer satisfaction? Looking narrowly at the tax collection, in 2004, we spent €1 to collect 100 euros. And in 2013, this is 0.4 to collect 100. So the reduction in the number of employees is quite comparable, 44% of the workforce released. Luckily, Estonia has always been a low unemployment environment, so it hasn't hurt us. Instead, it has freed people for more productive work. And coming away from the tax discussion and to more macro level, what we actually save nowadays is only by signing digitally, not counting all other services and digital development in, is 2% of our GDP. And I think, compared to, I believe it outside Estonia, in a very developed country in Europe, and compared to my administrative personal load, which I had to carry, to this what we have in Estonia, I think it must be around maybe 3-4 working days of a while of everybody's time. So this new environment, digitally disrupted society, is also economically much more effective. But I promised to look around the corner and also next challenges as digital society. It may be that since we are already around the first bend, that we see a little bit clearer what is waiting us and the new questions. And before I go into this subject matter, I think it's particularly interesting that it's today when we are talking about this, because the whole world is standing at awe and discovering what can go wrong in digital if you do not think that actually this is what we were seeking for. We've always known that giving our personal information means we get free services and somebody needs to make a revenue out of it, and now it's exposed. And we say, shock and horror, you thought it's about Nike and Adidas, but not about political parties. But this is very important that we don't confuse things. If you have a safe environment where people can identify each other, then digital channels, technically, they are not bad in any way. I mean, the carrier is never the guilty party. Technology is never the guilty party. It's only how we regulate or do not regulate, or how we understand or don't understand. And it all comes always down to identification. Some people really don't like big internet companies, but as soon as their people need to talk to businesses, what do? In Estonia, I put my state-provided signature under this kind of communication. Most people rely on Amazon or Google identification tools, I'm sorry to say, without any state guarantee. It's, I believe, a bit irresponsible of governments to leave their people and businesses this way alone in the digital sphere where they are anyway. Anyway, if I think about what is to come, then while EU is grappling with taxing in the analog world and trying to understand that who gets the tax revenue of a Starbucks coffee delivered somewhere in Europe, I think we are already seeing that we need to rethink totally our tax system and also, for that matter, our social services delivery system, because the jobs are changing because of technology. This is something I like to call Alice in Wonderland problem. You know, when the cat was disappearing and the green was staying on. And, you know, if the industrial job is disappearing, then of course our social model, which is based on the tax river coming in from big company where people have gathered to work more effectively. And therefore it's been an easy model for us. It has really made it easy to collect taxes because people work in one company. They have contracts for life or for a certain period of time. And it's all very organized and very simple to understand and follow. But I don't think that technology will allow us to stay with that solution. First of all, I think that as we saw in agricultural sector, the jobs disappear and we provide our food with 3 to 5% of the workforce in modern world. I think in industry quite soon we will similarly see that we will provide all the goods we need with a similar proportion of workforce. So the rest will be doing something else. And this will be very different. What it would be, we do not know exactly, but we have some hints. First of all, we know it's not going to be terribly high-tech. There has been long this thinking that vulnerable classes are those who are working in blue-collar jobs, and I think it's Jerry Kaplan from Stanford University who has mentioned that automation is blind to the color of your collar. And as I gave you the example of Estonian, taxmen, it is indeed true. And also the new job creation is more democratic than we might think, because you can be a traveling YouTuber making money out of this, and it's not it doesn't take you a degree. Similarly, for example, we have in Estonia, it's a real-life example, somewhere in Mooste, the southern Estonian county, of a couple of thousand people. There lives a man, he came from South Africa, by the way. So he's not Estonian even, he's Afrikaan. And he makes bows and arrows. And they are world class. And his market is global. So none of his customers live closer to him than 1,000 kilometers probably. So all these kind of handicraft jobs, they are liberated from the need to not only to travel around the markets surrounding you, but also trying to agree with souvenir shops. So you see, the new job opportunities actually are being created. Some of them can also be quite specialized and also help quite a lot those people with let's say, difficulties in living in our socially very demanding world. For example, an autistic person who agrees to knit only red socks can nowadays make a living, because probably globally among the billions of people online, he will find enough takers for his red socks, and he doesn't need to talk to anybody in the process of doing so. So I don't agree with those who say that these new jobs will be all for PhDs, narrowly selected people. I think the change is actually quite democratic. But the problem, of course, is that during this transition, if we think back to the industrial transition, it was painful indeed for people who had lower financial cushions. Why it was painful? Because there was no social system and there was no education. Now we need to keep providing these to people while our tax base is being eroded, because jobs are changing and we need to rethink totally how we gather our taxes. Take this example. I work in the morning. I have an MBA and I'm a financial manager by education. And in the morning I work for somebody here in London. And then in the afternoon I work for somebody in Australia. And I choose to live 3 months a year in Tallinn and 6 months a year in Sydney and somewhere else. So globally. I work globally. I have a narrow set of specialized skills which I can sell globally. Wonderful. I don't need an enterprise anymore. I can sell directly. This is also already happening here. A number of self-employed people is growing very quickly in UK and in Netherlands and elsewhere in Europe. So narrow specialization, independent work in different places. Who will get my taxes? How? Who will provide my social services? I want my children to have Estonian language education. I want it online, living in Australia. This is how we need to think about how digital disruption is really changing our society. And this is no sci-fi. I mean, this is already happening. If you look at the macro statistics, you can see self-employed people's numbers are rising. The basis on which people make a living, I mean, think Airbnb and all those, it's widening. Understanding of the work as being something from 9 to 5 in one country, in one company, fixed home address, fixed job address. It's going, and it's good, because people have more freedom. They have better work-life balance. And it is easier for women to manage babies in high demand and high reward jobs this way. So it's not bad, it's good. But we need to understand today that this is happening, and we needn't discuss Starbucks only. We need also to solve the Starbucks tax issue. But we need to really think about the digital environment. So I think this will trickle down to the whole society, and much more people will work independently, and the education system needs to adapt as well, because of course one thing we know for certain is that going once through the pain of getting a master's degree or even a PhD will not take you to the retirement anymore, probably in this quick technological change. And you need to therefore radically also change how you teach people. We already see universities responding to this challenge, offering shorter-term courses which doesn't give you a degree but gives you a skill set. And I think we need to really observe our kids, see what they are doing and achieving before they enter the school system, and think, do we really can afford to continue educating these kids the way we have been doing? I mean, children in the kindergarten, they try to enlarge the window panels to make their mom to come closer, or try to do this way so that the mom will come from the door to. So this is a new skill set which we need to teach to people. I mean, differences between digital and analog. But at the same time, these kids, if they are not English, they learn actually already a second language before they enter the school. Because, I mean, YouTubers mostly speak English. I had a child thoroughly fluent in French and Estonian. His smaller brother was fluent in English as well, not because of internet, but kindergarten. He realized he has a deficiency in his education. It took him a year. He's now fluent in English as I am. No lesson, nothing. Okay, he was French speaking, so the vocabulary is the same, the grammar and pronunciation is different, as you know, and it's probably easier to come from French to English. But kids know a lot more than we did, and they know different things than we did. Yet they go to school and start the same curriculum, more or less what we do. We also still have artificial borders in people entering different education systems. Well, when I was 15, I had discussion why I cannot listen to the university courses if I'm able to understand them. Problem's still there. I think we need to make all kind of learning levels available to people, never mind their previous educational experience and never mind their age, particularly the age. Because as I said, no one, and I say it always when I speak to students graduating from university, no one here in this room today will still be making the money from the same things in 30 years' time. Doctors probably have the best chance, but even there, think of e-health developments. Here, your national medical system, you are so proud of here, I know, and rightly so. They are testing, diverting calls which they have identified as not being life-threatening to an automatized system which will help you to diagnose and then take the right decision on where to go. Also looking at the people's behavior online. If somebody's ill, what they do, they normally Google. I think it's our obligation to make sure that they also find real, factual machines which are able to help them to take the right decision whether to call the doctor or not. Right now, mostly they find what they find is voodoo and kind of weird alternative stuff. I think we need to understand that also this profession, which I think is the most stable, is changing. So we have a lot of things which we need to do, and I have not even come to the artificial intelligence. I know that Elon Musk says there is a 10% chance that by 2025 we will have a singularity and a 50% chance by 2050. My first education from university is genetic engineering, and I have to say that when I was studying, then everybody was sure that by 2010 we will clone the dog, and by 2020 we'll clone human beings without any problems. And we all know that this has not at all happened. So it might be that with AI, if I now read the fully scientific analysis of the apocalyptic future, I take them with a pinch of salt, because it might not never realize. But again, it doesn't matter. There are systems which can learn to the extent that they seem intelligent to us already now in the existence. And we absolutely need to think what to do with them. I very much like the example of a security question. For example, we know that in the history there has been a case that somebody sent a worm to somebody else's nuclear reactor to make it less useful for bad use. What if you send this worm now and it has learned quite a lot and is able to take decisions not independently but automatically? So it's not singular, it's not thinking. But what it is doing, it is analyzing the data, what it has, and you think you control and predict the outcome because you know it's not a singular AI. But you know it's smart enough to use the data, what it is finding, and you think it finds a certain information in such a nuclear system. But let's take now another system element, and this is somebody who has used a contaminated computer in the system. Just look that with the same computer went online and read, let's say, news from last week, and the traces of these news are now in the system. So our AI, or seemingly AI, very clever automatic worm, sees this information. And it knows it's in the nuclear system, and it knows it's military. And the news, what it is reading is United Nations is planning to ban artificial intelligence use for military use. What will it do? It doesn't need to be singular, it can be devastating. And some people say that AI will have no reason to act unreasonably when we have finally created it, or something similar, that it will not make our world into paperclips, which I believe is the most common example used. That it will use all our resources to make the world into paperclips because it got the wrong signal. And this will not happen because, I mean, such a stupid signal will not be acceptable for an AI. Now I'm asking what we are currently doing, today less than a couple of months ago, but we are using real resources, electricity, cooling, brain power, computing power, to do what? To mine Bitcoin. Is Bitcoin a real money linked to any real economy? I don't think so. Did we know that something will definitely go wrong with it? Yes, we definitely did. Did it keep us from wasting resources, making huge amounts of resources into Bitcoin? It didn't. So, I mean, we can do it, and we are fully singular according to the definition of AI. Then why wouldn't the AI do it? So in Estonia, what we are trying to do is, indeed, we are trying to pilot in 2018 a proactive state model. This should be able to use closed blockchain-based data integrity platform. It will be able to detect and solve all cyber incidents on public ecosystem within 1 second. But it will also try to do different things. It will try to pilot traffic accident resolution. And our objective is that from incident in 30 minutes time, the resolution will be there if it's only an insurance case. So if this accident happens and you log it in the system, then in 30 minutes time, all necessary formalities will be handled automatically. For this, what you would need, you need fully digitalized insurance system. You need fully digitalized car registry. And you need people to trust the system, to look for different data in different databases and serve them. For this, again, we need to look at our legal space. We need to do something which I don't think any country has even attempted. We need to regulate not technology, but something wider, a human and algorithm interaction, an interaction between a human person and an algorithm. We want to regulate precisely this. We don't want to regulate any specific technology. Something akin like you are not allowed to destroy the world, not that you cannot use small nukes or big nukes. And this is what we are discussing, how to do this. For that, we probably need a separate legal entity for AI or AI similar system, automated system, which to most people look like AI. I noticed that when I go to forums where AI is discussed, then the panel normally quite quickly falls down to automated systems without actually recognizing. So I think legally, at least, luckily, we don't need to make the distinction. So I think that in 2 years' time, we have taken another bend around the curve, and we will be able to explain to the rest of the world how the world then would look like. But I seriously hope that the first bend of safe, personalized internet use will be available for much more people than it is now. It's not only Estonians, it's also, I believe, Luxembourgish, Finns, Latvians, Danes, many countries who are seeing some success with providing people with digital identity. But the worry sometimes is that sometimes we are held back with really ridiculous problems. And for example, I know of a country in Europe which is really worried that using digital identity and digital space for state people communication has bankrupted their post office, which is of course true. Most post offices in the world struggle because nobody is sending their emails. I don't know whether you have noticed, but my Christmas cards mostly tend to arrive in February now because there is a capacity issue, obviously, in the post offices, so they cannot deliver. But this is the way of problems, the problems we tend to see that we need to tackle with. I think it's totally wrong. I think we need really to be thinking more in the vein as we in the Estonia are looking at. And I'm really worried because if you think that in the previous days, new technology, when it was developed, it was normally, I don't know, NASA ordered or government supported and somehow publicly controlled, publicly paid. If you look at the digital, it's much more diffuse. So my bet that if there will be something which will fool most of us into thinking that it's AI, even if it might not be, it is not going to be government development. Where it will happen, we don't know. It's quite easy to recognize if somebody has really created a singular system, because for that they would need a neural network like computer model. This technology, it's physical, it's easy to detect, and probably also detect an energy hole somewhere because its energy use will be huge. But I'm so worried that our decision-making process at multilateral level, particularly if I look, for example, how UN has not managed to come to an agreement on how we apply international law in digital, despite lots of work being done by the working group led by Marina Kaljurand, another Estonian, or despite the fact what the NATO CCD-COE, NATO Center of Excellence on Cyber Defense in Tallinn has been doing in creating Tallinn Manual 1 and 2, trying to broaden our understanding of how international law should apply to digital. We are taking much longer to regulate than it is taking technology to develop. And this is the new situation. For the nuclear arms, we knew who had them, we still roughly know who has them, and we've had 70 years to try to come to terms. As I demonstrated, AI could soon solve the problem. I mean, as Patricia here said, when discussed before, AI might actually solve the problem, but will it solve it the way we want it to solve it? That would be all for now, but I'm ready to answer all your questions.
Excellent, thank you very much. I think a lot of us in this room would probably feel a lot more confident if other heads of state had a similar fluency and literacy on technological issues and the challenges of the future as you do. I'm sort of interested in the origins of this. I mean, what do you attribute Estonia's particular successes? How did it have particular advantages to begin with? What explains this coming to grips with these successive waves of innovation and adaptation?
Lack of money and the fierce drive to have a modern Western society, and having really, I mean, in this sense, neighbors like Finland and Sweden and Norway. So our people look for that level of living standard, and they knew they had lost 50 years in occupation, and they wanted something radically different. So right from the beginning, right from the creation of Estonian tax code, we realized that if we do it like everybody else does it, leapfrogging is not going to happen. So we got into habit of looking for leapfrogging, and also, well, if your people are poor and desperate, they tend to care less about the sensitivities which you are facing. I give you that. I mean, it was easier definitely in Estonia. Mm-hmm. But it also took concerted effort that the private sector came to our aid, actually, very much. We didn't do it alone. Like, they paid for big parts of our Tiger Leap program, which educated people digitally. They offered free services for retired people on online banking. So people, instead of taking bus and going to the bank, and Estonia is not a densely populated place, it's the size of Netherlands and 1.3 million people, so next bank office is 50 kilometers away, then it was possible to make everybody use these services, even retired and even elderly people. Me, myself, I don't have a personal Facebook account because I've realized I don't want to trade my information for, I've had several of false identity ones, though, I have to say. But my mother is fully Facebook compatible. She's 77, and she does online banking, and so does every other retired person. Actually, retired people greatly benefit from all kinds of people who have difficulties leaving their home actually greatly benefit from well, digital service offer. Because you can, I mean, I can go and declare my taxes when my kids are in bed. Most people cannot. So I think this readiness of our society to work with
how
the
exportable
government.
do you think the model is? Do you think there are other countries that can essentially use you as a template, or is each case a bit sui generis?
Many African countries think they will try to do it our way. We have signed a memorandum of understanding with African Union, and we have already, I think, more than 10 years ago, we created the Estonian e-Governance Academy. It's a joint venture of Estonian government and UNDP. And there are takers. There are also, there is Oman, who claims that it has risen in the ease of doing business index by 100 places. And it's one Estonian company who built their online systems. My son is working in a company which is going to build an online tax board for another Gulf country. And so we do export. So far it's been easier to export to those who can pay, but I'm sure we can put development money and our expertise together. Now, if I come to developed countries, then many of you actually inside the government and inside the private sector separately have many similar processes. What you lack only is this single backbone. And this single backbone will also make your use of digital services much safer, because then people will not have to have the same password for every site they use. They will have fully secure digital identity, which they can always use. And the problems of QWERTY and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 and those things will go away simply.
And how do you persuade people that that unified system is not a single point of failure? And how do you structure it in order to develop resilience and the ability to resist challenges?
Because it's not a single point. Databases are numerous. You can take one off maybe. We also we have actually an agreement with Luxembourg on data embassies. So there is not only in Estonia copies, but soon in Luxembourg as well there will be. And it's an embassy. They cannot enter it. It has all the rights of sovereignty like that. Luxembourg is great at digitalization as well. And they have digital ID, by the way, as well already for 10 years. They have simply less services. But it is also not that we only have this digital ID card for identification. We have smart ID, we have mobile ID, and there are other ways and means of developing. For example, a couple of months ago, because there's this Bitcoin mania, one of our ideas to issue to every Estonian a token, let's say 1 million tokens, which they can then use to identify themselves to state systems. somehow morphed into the idea of Estcoin creation, which got us in big trouble, and lots of explanations with European Central Bank. You can imagine a euro area country issuing a cryptocurrency. This was not the plan. The plan is everybody has million tokens they can use as identification tools, for example. So there are numerous ways to make the system more difficult to attack. On the other hand, nothing is globally safe and secure. But then again, come back to analog. What if your archive burnt down?
Yeah.
So.
And how confident are you about the capacity to stay ahead of this innovation curve? You alluded to a number of different ways of innovation. You talked about the rising public expectations in an environment of an erosion of the tax base at the same time where resources are tight. How well are you doing? How confident are you about keeping ahead of this game?
Well, even digital empires would see decline at some point. We don't know. Life is complicated, but what I know is that we don't want to stay that far ahead of everybody else in Europe, because problem is we're tiny and 80% of our economy is exports. So we'd like Europe to have a digital single market and a single identification means and possibilities. So we don't want to sit alone on Mars while you are still on Earth. In fact, we're doing everything to try to spread this knowledge, because I think that we will all economically gain. And we will remain ahead simply because we are thinking of a proactive state, while you are thinking of a digital reactive state. So it shows that we have quite a distance, of a spare space to develop services and then offer them to you as well.
We'll open it up to questions from the floor. If you'd like to ask a question, please keep your hand up. Wait for the microphone to reach you, and for the President's benefit, identify yourself, please, and keep it nice and brisk. Yes, please.
Hi, you've spoken about the digitization of government and being a proactive government, and I'm thinking of the most recent manifestation of digital government, the most forceful manifestation being the social credit system in China. I'm wondering if you think there's ever an appropriate extent to apply that paradigm.
As I said already, part of our digital success as a democratic country is that the state has set itself limits. For example, it has made promises that it will not nose around the data of the people. It has also promised that if it does look for some certain needs which people normally have agreed that this will take place, people will be notified. You have to, similarly as you protect democracy and human rights and personal data and privacy in analog world, we have to come to an understanding that all this similarly applies to the technology and digital world. This has to be our promise to our people. Otherwise, indeed, the big brother-like systems are possible technologically, because whatever we do in analog, we just do it quicker in technological world. So if you think about the Chinese society, then the social scoring is a normal manifestation of the development of society and the use of technology for that type of society. Not that I'm approving it, but it's perfectly understandable why it is there and why it can never happen in a liberal democratic environment like Estonia.
Patricia Lewis.
Thank you very much, Patricia Lewis from Chatham House. You spoke very well about the international problems that we're seeing in terms of reaching agreement on things like international law, but the other place where we're seeing a lot of problems is in the fragmentation of the internet, or the splinternet as it's increasingly being called. And I wonder if you could say a few words about the dangers that this poses and the way in which we might be able to, if you like, reach out beyond the governmentally imposed borders to the citizen connections that we can make.
We think we are overcoming this with the single platform and universal digital identity, which comes with your passport. So everybody has access, so there shouldn't be a socially divisive element in it. But I don't think it will happen without work. We should actually put resources and emphasis and energy in making this inclusive. But there is even more important element to make it hygienic. I don't like to call it cyber defense. I prefer for civil society to use the term cyber hygiene. We need to teach our people that they need to be responsible for their own safety in the internet world as they are in the analog world. And we need to teach people also that everything which manifests in the internet, making them somehow feeling left out, is also something for which they need to know where to look for help. This is very important that we do this. Technology will never take care of that. It will always be people. And sometimes I'm being told, what are you talking about, cyber hygiene, how can we teach it to everybody? Then I first say that, look, we have had a generation who grew up in digital environment, and WannaCry didn't pass even once in Estonia. NotPetya passed through Estonia and manifested itself in one system or one company which actually managed internationally the whole of its technological environment, so was not really integrated in Estonia, which shows that it can be taught. Cyber hygiene can be taught. And also, I mean, we taught people to wash hands, not to fall ill. And we had far worse communication means and skills then, so don't tell me cyber hygiene is hopeless. I think it's possible. And what you are talking about, for me, is part of a cyber hygiene.
Yes, please, in the front row. Just wait for the microphone. And there we go. Yes.
Thank you. Madam President, thank you. My name is Euripides. I'm the High Commissioner of Cyprus. Fascinating. Thank you very much for your leadership and for your vision. I mean, we take inspiration. Down south, Cyprus takes good inspiration from you. Please, what are some of the downsides of what we're talking about, number one? Number two, cyber attacks, which seem to be, you know, the coin of the day. How do you fight against that? Backup systems, I suppose, because if you put all your eggs in one basket, something can go frightfully wrong and the whole system comes down. I do not know. Perhaps my imagination is working overtime. And if we are at this stage, also, if you care to address very briefly the issues of the spin, the hype, false fake news that seem to be having a life of their own. They're virtual, but they create reality. Thank you.
First, I just said in my speech that we are aiming at the proactive protection for the system so that through their own communication with each other within a minute they'll solve every problem, which falls on them cyber attack wise. It's not enough to keep your, let's say, your electricity grid where you need a 10 millisecond solution up and running, but it will be enough for most systems. Second, there is no whole system, as you said it. It's a distributed system. There are several databases, and the only thing which we have different from the rest of the world is the identification platform called Crossroads. And you should never build, and this has been a most common error, that people start building digital governments, and they do it like a train. A person enters the first wagon and then has to walk through all wagons to get to a necessary service. It's cumbersome, and it will just collapse under the traffic. It needs to be a star. You have this single platform of identification, and then you have millions of interactions. Possible interactions can be services, can be two people, can be people and government. And if any one of them is down, then it doesn't in any way affect the other part. But as I said, I mean, death and taxes are probably the only things which are secure. The only thing which I am quite assured is that it's much more secure and much more 24/7 and 365 than a paper system. And it doesn't have the vulnerabilities of the paper system. It has its own ones. We need to fight with them. Cyber attacks. Estonia was in 2007 on the cyber attack. Nowadays, I can guarantee you that if you have one single digital system in your country, it's under this kind of cyber attacks several times a day. Nobody blinks an eye. So technology can take care of some, but again, you need technology plus cyber hygiene. It cannot be the only one. And I think it is, of course, easier if you had entered internet when it was just some home pages and some viruses and Kaspersky. It was easier, I admit, to then start learning than now joining Internet of Things. So, I mean, those societies who are very far behind, the great downside is that now it's very expensive to educate them. But this needs to be done because you cannot take away technology.
Thank you. Yes, gentleman on the aisle just there with the blue blazer.
Hi, Hadi Kavalan, I'm a Chatham House member. touched very tantalizingly on the economic and social transition, and I was wondering if you could share some thoughts with us on what you view as the sort of policy options that Europe has in front of it.
I think Europe has a certain competitive advantage, at least to deal with these problems, because we have free movement of people. We are to a certain extent used to that people may work in one country, carry their benefits with them, and change rapidly their working environment and addresses. So we should have a competitive advantage over other developed areas. Are we able to use it? That I do not know. There is another element which we need to keep in mind. Everything I can today think of how to solve these issues will be in one way or another in contradiction with OECD rules on how we treat international business and taxes. So it has to be global. There's no point of making it European. Europeans have certainly much more understanding, and we can help with really demonstrating that this is happening. But the problem is one-side problem, but the other way why I'm confident it will happen. Because otherwise younger people, they will not accept our way of living and working. We may say them that no, you have to have an address and work, and then we will provide you with services. The best part of their earning years, from 25 to 35, maybe 40 if they don't have kids earlier, they will not pay into the system. But all our systems, our pension system, are free to opt in at later stage without any long-term penal system. So I'm quite sure that we'll quite soon realize that we don't want young people to opt out, and they don't listen to us. One possibility is we go all private on insurance, fragmented and private. I don't think that would be a good thing, precisely because we need to support societies during the transition.
Yes, gentleman in the blue shirt, just on the aisle again.
Hi, my name is Taha, Chatham House member. You touched upon around education of young kids. You rightly you mentioned around, kids learn a lot of things, but then they, as soon as they're old enough to go to school, they start just like the way we did. What is your government or your country doing to change the education system to address that? Thank you.
First of all, what we have to do, and you sometimes have to be self-critical, if you are sitting in a country which together with Finland is highest up in the PISA tests in Europe and pretty high globally as well, it's very hard to convince your teachers that something needs to change. But yet we do attempt. I think what we need is a system which is based on modular learning, and entering the modules needs to be on the feedback. So it's not like marking, but you test the ability and skills of people, and you propose to develop those skills further, and you propose to help with the other skills which they have not mastered. So I think this might be a solution at some point. And I think it would be very good and easy to do in the countries which currently lack a proper education system and lack access to the schools, because I think big parts of it could be MOOCs or online courses. And since I think that the academic degree, I'm sorry to say, for big parts of working population will be relevant, we could easily teach practical skills to lots and lots of girls in Africa, for example, through these models. And they would be much more flexible in developing these educational services than any of us, including Estonia.
Yes, Matt.
Hi, I'm Matthew Oxenford, a researcher in the Global Economy and Finance Department here at Chatham House. I want to follow up on the question a few questions ago about Europe. You talk about entrepreneurship, but it seems like the next step is sort of scaling up, high-tech entrepreneurship. And it seems like most of the large world-beating companies that have been doing that have been either based in the United States, the Facebooks, the Googles, et cetera, and increasingly numbers in China. Estonia has obviously punched quite a bit above its weight class with Skype, TransferWise, and others, but Europe as a whole seems to be lagging behind despite all the advantages you talked about. As a European head of state, how do you sort of explain this discrepancy, and do you think that there's policy recommendations to try and improve it?
First of all, you don't need a unicorn to actually take your society forward. The services which you can nowadays create can be perfectly beautiful and either local, necessary to your local people, or very narrowly specialized, meaning you have a relatively narrow market. You don't need to become a Facebook. but your specific service might be very valuable for certain peoples globally. So I think that there the future will be more fragmented, what we are seeing right now. And indeed, it is true that Facebook has created a community of billions of people, which is a value it can now sell. But I don't think that we should look for future in the past. I think the future is much more diverse and diversified because it's becoming cheaper to design these kind of specific services. So I think that what you need is a vibrant startup community rather than a unicorn. A unicorn helps that when you sell it, you create a vibrant startup community because, I mean, they will probably move their headquarters from your country to somewhere else and all the people will be available for new startups and the money comes to the country. People in Estonia are joking that we really want Skype to move their development center finally out of Estonia because that would release us to deal with much more new ideas. Skype money is still in Estonia and is responsible in big part to, to finance our startup community. But I think that the diverse matters as well, so don't despair if you don't have unicorns.
We have time for just one more question. Yes, and the red jumper there.
Uygar Kılıç, member and freelance marketing consultant. My question is, do you think that the government should have a hard copy of the important digital information as a backup?
No. What is a hard copy? Why? Why do you think a paper is somehow more durable than...
The thing is that I'm using internet since 1994 and I'm a bit skeptic with internet security because it's not 100% safe and if something goes wrong, which can happen to everyone, so at least we having a hard copy is like a fail-safe.
I just looked at my work contract signed in 1994 and you know what, it has faded.
Touché. Well, thank you very much indeed. I think you've reminded us all that technology and the impact of technology is not just about what we do and how we do it, but it's actually much more fundamentally about how we think. And that's the next step in human evolution, I'm sure that we all need to grapple with. I'm also glad that you made several references to artificial intelligence. This is something where Chatham House is trying to lead in terms of how you connect AI issues to the questions of international affairs, not just on shaping the future of conflict, but also enhancing human security. And indeed, a larger initiative in the next couple of years here is going to be very much on how we embrace technology as a provider of solutions to international public policy challenges. And we look forward very much to sustaining the conversation with colleagues in Estonia on that. Would you please join me in thanking the President for her presentation?